1922. Night. An hour or two before morning, I'd say. A cool, salty breeze swept over the grass, blowing out to sea. The small fishing village down the coast was only barely visible through the fog. The lighthouse stood tall on the headland, overlooking the bay as wave after wave gently broke upon the shore below. The moon faintly illuminated the surroundings. The lighthouse's lamp had curiously been extinguished. A subtle groan sounded from beneath the cliff at the end of the headland. The grass at the edge was cold and damp. At the bottom of the cliff was a man on the shore, lying on his stomach. He awoke to find himself awkwardly bent over a jagged rock and covered in sea foam. This is our protagonist, Thaddeus Thundergay. Wiping the sand from his face, Thaddeus climbed off the rock under him and slowly rose to his feet. Slowly cranking his head side to side, he attempted to gauge his surroundings. A narrow strip of shoreline between the sea and the cliff. Thaddeus sunk his head into his hand and groaned, grasping his face as if trying to tear it off. What? How did I... he murmured. He seemed as if he could not remember any of what happened earlier that night. He gently rubbed his arm as he stepped toward the cliff face, quietly groaning in pain. Thaddeus slowly limped along the rocky shoreline. He looked up to see the unlit lighthouse standing tall on the cliff ahead of him. He stared at it for a bit, scratching his head at the unusual sight. As he stumbled around the bend in the coast, something else caught his eye, something lying on the rocks ahead of him, obscured by the froth washing in with the waves. Seemingly intrigued, Thaddeus approached cautiously, carefully walking along the rocky beach. The lighthouse towered directly over him as he got close enough to see. It was another man, sprawled out flat across the rocks, face down. Thaddeus gasped at the realization and glanced over the man's clothing. He must have recognized it. Thaddeus crouched down next to him and slowly stuck his arm out, gripping the man's shoulder. He hesitated for a few seconds before turning the body over. Thaddeus recoiled in horror. It was the lighthouse keeper, Lambert, bloodied all over, dead on the rocks beneath the lighthouse. Earlier that day, Thaddeus slowly trudged up the hill to the lighthouse as the very last rays of sunlight shimmered through the trees in the west. The clear, unmarked bottle in his hand glimmered as it swung back and forth with his steady march. The lighthouse's lamp slowly rotated atop the tower, its beam shining through the mist out to sea. The salty sea air corroded the white finish of the exterior, flecks of old paint peeling off one by one. Small, slightly out-of-shape hedges dotted the perimeter of the lighthouse. Dust accumulated on the windows as if they hadn't been cleaned in ages. Loud metallic scraping could be heard from inside as the lighthouse keeper pumped fuel up to the light. On the ground floor, a small rectangular workroom protruded from the side of the tower, with the front door at the far end and windows on either side. A small wooden table with 2 chairs beside it sat by the southern wall. Light emanated from a kerosene lantern on the windowsill next to the table, illuminating the room in a dim yellow haze. Thaddeus reached the door, giving a loud, distinct knock. "Lambert, I want to show you something," he shouted at the top of his lungs through the door. The staircase in the other room rattled with each step as the lighthouse keeper descended before making his way across the workroom, unlocking the door and pulling it open. "Well, what is it you've got this week?" Lambert asked. "Let me just put this down," Thaddeus said as he stepped past Lambert into the lighthouse and set the bottle on the table. Lambert pushed the door shut and locked it. Thaddeus turned to face Lambert. "Right, look it. I want to show you this," he said as he reached into his pocket. Thaddeus pulled out the handle of a knife and held it to his side as he pressed a metal button into the smooth wooden finish. A sharp blade flung out from the side and clicked into place at the end of the handle. "I got my hands on one of these a few days ago," he said. "Oh, one of those, spring knives, or what you call them," Lambert said, eyeing the switchblade in Thaddeus's hand. "Stand back, look," Thaddeus said as he tossed the knife upward. Light from the lantern flickered off the razor-sharp blade as it twirled around in the air. After reaching its apex, the knife fell toward Thaddeus's open hand. As Thaddeus attempted to close his hand to catch the switchblade, the handle bounced off his thumb and the knife fell to the floor, clattering against the floorboards. Thaddeus muttered a profanity as he bent down to retrieve the switchblade. "You want to try that again?" Lambert scoffed as he grabbed a torn box of playing cards from a small shelf on the wall. "Oh, go to hell," Thaddeus muttered as he stood back up with the switchblade in his hand, taking a step toward his chair. No, by all means, give it another shot," Lambert encouraged him. Thaddeus sighed, giving Lambert an irritated glare. "I did it earlier. Hold on," he said as he prepared to try again, feeling the weight of the knife in his hand, shifting his gaze upward as he flung it into the air again. The blade spun as it rose and fell. Thaddeus clamped his fingers around the knife's handle as it fell into his hand. "There it is!" Thaddeus exclaimed proudly as he shook the switchblade excitedly and slid the blade back into the handle with his thumb. "Ha! Careful with your fingers now. You'll still have to hold your cards," Lambert remarked as he sat down at the table and shook the cards out of the box. A distraught Thaddeus marched up the hill to the lighthouse in the dark, leaving his dead friend by the shore. The door to the lighthouse had been left slightly ajar. He pushed the door open the rest of the way and walked into the pitch-black workroom. As his eyes adjusted further to the darkness, he stepped toward the windowsill by the table and picked up a matchbox resting next to the now burnt-out kerosene lantern. Thaddeus struck a match against the box to relight it. The dim yellow flame flickered to life, illuminating Thaddeus's anguished face as he adjusted the lantern's wick. Beads of sweat glistened on his forehead as he slowly ran his hands through his hair. "It can't be. Something happened. I can't think," Thaddeus said under his breath. Lifting the kerosene lantern, Thaddeus slowly scanned the dimly lit workroom, searching for an answer. What had happened earlier that night? Managed to get the good gin again. Pinched it from work. Red left early, Thaddeus said, seated at the small wooden table across from Lambert. Dim lantern light from the windowsill beamed across their faces. You have any of that on the way up here? Lambert wryly asked, glancing at the bottle on the table as he shuffled the deck of cards. No, just a little bit. You just want the same amount as before? Thaddeus asked. Just a smidge. Don't want any trouble, Lambert said. Oh, come on. Those guys from the service can't keep such a close eye on everyone. As long as you don't let their light go out, Thaddeus said with a laugh as he poured a paltry amount of the gin into Lambert's glass. Lambert simply gave a non-committal grunt in response, not saying anything else. Thaddeus poured himself a full glass of the clear liquor and set the bottle on the table. Both sat quietly as Lambert continued riffling the cards together. After a moment, Lambert broke the silence. You know, there was a break-in a couple nights ago, he said as he straightened out the cards and set them on the table. A break-in? What, here? Thaddeus asked. I didn't hear anything from up there, but I woke up one morning to find the lock on the door all stoved in. I had to make a quick fix to it, Lambert said. Oh, they steal all that cash you're holding for me? Thaddeus jested, grabbing his glass. Well, as far as I know, they didn't take anything, so at least that. Probably just those damn kids from town coming up here drinking if I were to guess, Lambert said, rubbing his chin. Thaddeus sighed. Well, speaking of which, I'm gonna get drunk, he said, raising his glass. Lambert broke his contemplation. All right, very well, he said, lifting his nearly empty glass to Thaddeus's. Their glasses struck together as they exclaimed in unison, Cheers! Thaddeus cautiously stepped around the workroom, holding the small kerosene lantern in his hand as he carefully observed his surroundings. The small wooden table by the window had been overturned and was lying on its side. Playing cards were strewn across the floor next to the table, alongside what was left of the gin bottle. Small and large fragments of broken glass littered the floor. Thaddeus stared at the mess before him. No, this wasn't... I don't remember this, he quietly muttered to himself, shaking his head slightly. Thaddeus slowly shifted his gaze toward the stairs in the other room. Carefully stepping around the shards of glass, he walked into the tower. Thaddeus clasped the iron handrail on the staircase and began his ascent, holding the lantern tightly as he climbed the steep, spiraling steps. The yellow light shined out a window as he passed the first landing and continued up. His footsteps stopped in place as he reached the service room just before the top. God, what in the hell happened here? Thaddeus shuddered loudly by the second landing window. A trail of blood meandered around the room, leading up the final set of stairs. Thaddeus stepped around the room for a bit, trying desperately to piece together what could have possibly happened here. After a moment, Thaddeus's shoes loudly clanged upon the staircase once again as he resumed his ascent to the top of the lighthouse, following the trail of blood. I raise you $1, Thaddeus mumbled, hunched over the table as he added $1 bill to the pile of money. The bottle of gin on the table was almost half empty by this point. Thaddeus was just about finished with his second glass. You all in by now? Lambert asked. That's all the cash I brought, Thaddeus said as he stared at his cards. Lambert matched Thaddeus's bet and dealt the remainder of the cards as Thaddeus sipped the remaining gin from his glass. Thaddeus looked at his cards. His expression suddenly shifted. No, he whispered to himself in dismay. Oh, good hand, I see, Lambert quipped as he chose 2 of his 7 cards to discard and set on the table. After also discarding, Thaddeus set his cards down and buried his face in his hands. Well, a pair beats nothing, Lambert said as he grabbed the cash in the center of the table. Oh, I had 4 spades. I almost had it. Thaddeus sputtered, repeatedly tapping his knuckles on the table in frustration. Yeah, so it goes, Lambert said apathetically as he scooted his chair back to get up. Wait, just one more hand, Thaddeus pleaded. You said you were out of cash, Lambert said. After a moment of hesitation, Thaddeus reached into his pocket and pulled out his switchblade. He took a deep breath and gently laid the knife on the table. $5, he stated, his voice wavering slightly. Lambert eyed the switchblade for a moment. All right, I'll bite, he said, sitting back down and placing $5 beside the switchblade. Just get deal the cards out, Thaddeus murmured. Right, nothing more to bet, Lambert said quietly, dealing 7 cards each to himself and Thaddeus. Thaddeus gazed at his cards, held tightly in his gin-soaked fingers. His bloodshot eyes suddenly lit up. Yes, right, yes, he said as he took 2 cards and discarded them to his side. Thaddeus slapped the rest of his cards down on the table. 2 pairs, jacks and 8s, he exclaimed. Lambert drew a sharp breath as he slowly laid out his cards. 3 of a kind. Sorry. Thaddeus sat still as a statue in his chair, staring at the switchblade and money on the table with wide eyes as Lambert grabbed it all and stood up from his chair. Don't beat yourself up. There's always another time, Lambert said before walking away into the tower toward the stairs. Thaddeus's gaze shifted to the side as he let out an agonized sigh. The bottle of gin sat at the edge of the table. His shaky hand slowly reached for the bottle and clamped around it tightly. Thaddeus lifted the opening of the bottle to his lips and threw his head back, guzzling the remainder of the gin. Thaddeus slowly emerged at the top of the tower. The Fresnel lens sat idly in the center of the dark lantern room, specks of blood staining its hypnotizing glass rings. Thaddeus followed the blood trail through a shattered window pane and stepped out onto the gallery, broken glass crunching under his shoes. The trail of blood vanished over the brink of the lighthouse. He grabbed the frigid railing and peered over the edge. Directly below him was Lambert's lifeless body on the shore below. Thaddeus leaned on the railing, gripping the side of his head with his hand. I don't get it. Someone must have broken in and... Who would do this? Thaddeus pondered out loud, dropping his arm to his side in resignation. He then suddenly shifted his head downward, as if he had felt something move in his pocket when he brought his arm down. Thaddeus hesitantly reached into his pocket, grabbing something and pulling it out. He held the object up to his face, slowly turning it around in his hand, examining it. What? I thought he took this. How did it... Thaddeus paused. His eyes widened. His breathing began to quicken. A shocked whimper escaped his mouth. The bloodied switchblade fell from his hands as he lost his grip. Thaddeus held his trembling hands in front of his face, staring at his palms. His legs gave way and he dropped to his knees. He knew what it must have meant. Oh God. Oh God, no. What have I done? What have I done? Thaddeus sat with his forehead on the table, staring at the cards laid out under his face. The bottle of gin stood beside him without a drop remaining. Lambert emerged from the stairwell. Might want to go home while you can still walk, all right, he said as he strolled into the workroom. Thaddeus croaked something indistinct as he lifted his head slightly. I'll put the cards back, he mumbled afterward, slurring his speech. Thaddeus merged his 5 cards into a stack, then took one last look at his 2 discards before adding them as well. As he was about to put his cards back into the pile on the table, however, his expression suddenly changed. He took his cards back and spread them out on the table again, rearranging them, counting under his breath. No, he cried out. What's the matter? Lambert asked bluntly. I could have played us straight. I had us straight this whole time. Look, 7, 8, 9, 10, Jack. Thaddeus blurted, pointing to his cards. Lambert stood closer and leaned over the table. Oh, I see, he said, seeming surprised. That knife's still mine. The money, I didn't lose anything, Thaddeus insisted, slapping his hand down on the table. Well, I mean, no, you played your 2 pair. Shame you missed the straight, but it is what it is, Lambert said, shrugging. Oh, damn it! You have my money! Thaddeus shouted as he lurched out of his chair abruptly, flipping the small wooden table over. The playing cards scattered outward and the gin bottle shattered into hundreds of pieces as it hit the floor. Lambert took a step back. Where do you have my knife? Thaddeus yelled as he staggered toward Lambert. Why don't you come back next week? I'll bet the knife first thing, Lambert said, slowly backing away from Thaddeus. That's it. You bleed me dry every week. Thaddeus growled as he lunged forward and gripped Lambert's collar, particles of spit flying out of his mouth as he shouted in Lambert's face. I had a strike, damn it. I should have won that, he continued. Lambert grabbed hold of Thaddeus by the sides and threw him to the ground with all his strength. Thaddeus slammed against the wooden plank floor of the workroom with a heavy thud, knocking the wind out of him. He clutched his arm in pain, writhing on the floor as Lambert stood over him. Thaddeus groaned in agony, muttering profanities under his breath. Lambert reached down. "All right, now, let's get you up," he said as he grabbed under Thaddeus' shoulders and lifted him to his feet. Lambert grabbed the backs of his arms firmly and walked him toward the door. "But you took... What about my... Thaddeus weakly grumbled as Lambert ushered him out of the lighthouse and into the cool air of the night. "It will be there for you next week, I can promise you that," Lambert said in a reassuring voice as he let go of Thaddeus' arms. Thaddeus mumbled something back that sounded like he was accepting Lambert's pledge. Thaddeus slowly stumbled down the hill away from the lighthouse, just barely maintaining his balance as he walked down the steep dirt path, disappearing into the night. Lambert stepped back inside and shut the door, locking it. As he walked back through the room, he glanced to his side at the mess Thaddeus had created, the broken glass and cards on the floor. Lambert sighed loudly. Well, about time for the fuel," he said to himself as he continued into the tower and began to climb the spiral staircase, ascending out of view. Upstairs, Lambert could be heard pumping up the kerosene to fuel the light. And with that, I broke my gaze through the dusty window and gripped the wooden frame. The window was stiff, but still unlocked as I had left it. I slid the window all the way up, and then climbed through the opening into the workroom. I then walked through the doorway into the tower, stepping up the rattly staircase as quietly as I could. I emerged into Lambert's living quarters and picked up Thaddeus' switchblade from a shelf, with the intent of giving it back to him afterward if I could find him. I figured there was very little chance of him walking all the way home without passing out on the ground somewhere. With the switchblade in my hand, I continued up the stairs to the next floor, the service room. There stood Lambert with his back turned to me. The rusty pump handle screeched loudly with each thrust downward, Lambert counting each plunge out loud. 61, 62, 63, 64. Lambert grunted under his breath. He never heard my approach.